But there's also a really prestigious honor that comes through the end of the year as well, and that is the NWSL Best 11. They usually award and recognize a best starting 11 and also a second best 11. So that's an exciting time to maybe take a look at players who could find themselves sprinkled right across either of those best 11s. And if you have already watched that episode where Lisa and I chatted a little bit about the nominees for the individual awards, you might have heard us sort of make our picks for those as well. So we thought it would be fun to come in here and do something similar with the best 11s. I'm hyped to do
Yes.
this.
I mean, because we love to do this. We love to highlight players. I want to put a disclosure out there. This was incredibly hard for me to
Oh,
pick. I do not vote in like the media that gets to actually do this and award. I know, Sandra, you have your hand a little bit more in that. This is more just doing it for attacking. They're doing it for me. And of course, there are some players that, as you reflect on the season, they immediately jump out to you like, okay, so and so is going to be on my best 11 list. Like I look at someone like a Sophia Smith, Alex Morgan, Golden Boot winner, Naomi Girma, defender. But there are other players that are, I'm not going to say bubble players, but there's like, it's so easy to find the top tier and then the players that didn't see a lot of minutes this year. And then all the players in the middle that have really good games or really influential moments in the year for their team, but maybe they weren't as consistent throughout the 22 games, or maybe they missed a big chunk due to injury. So their average of like minutes they played and impacts that they had, it changes a little bit. Whether a team traded a player away and then they had a great impact at one team and not so much at the first team that they started at. There's just like so many different factors that go into it that I find it extremely difficult to pick just 11, even just 22 players if we end up doing a first 11 and a second best 11. But I had a lot of fun with this, and I am really excited to hear who you picked, Sandra, and who you went for.
look, at this point, it's so. I think it's so tough because I think a lot of it does come down to regular season performances. I think oftentimes, just to sort of maybe shed a little light for people who don't know, there's always a preliminary round of voting for finalists, and it is primarily composed of votes between members of the NWSL Media Association, but the votes are weighted against on a weighted scale against players, coaches, GMs. So that's how the nominations are sort of listed out, and then in the final round of voting, there is a fan vote that's included as well and taken into consideration for the finalists that are put out there. So oftentimes when the preliminary voting categories take place, it's usually in the build up to the postseason. So a lot of this is, I feel, has a lot of um, has a lot of weight on the regular season performances. And I think what we're seeing, obviously, in this postseason, where you see some really outstanding individual performances, I think maybe that also kind of weighs on people's mind as well, where it's just kind of like, oh, how can so and so, not have been a finalist in here, or not maybe considered for that. I think people are starting to see that in maybe some categories like this Rookie of the Year category or the Goalkeeper of the Year category, right? Somebody like a Sam Coffey and their presence for Portland Thorns, right, in that Rookie of the Year category, or something like the goalkeeper battle that we saw between Phallus Joyce and Adriana French in the semifinal. People are probably, that perhaps is maybe was the deal breaker for them. Guess what? The voting closed. It closed a long time ago. So maybe that's also like something where it's like to take into consideration and think about as well. So I'm also excited to see who you kind of have scattered across the best 11, the second 11. I'm almost grateful for a second 11 to exist. It's always existed,
Yeah.
but I think for like we're celebrating 10 years of NWSL's existence, and I just sort of feel like this year, now more than ever, it's like, gosh, there were just so many really, really good performances from individuals for their teams. So yeah, I'm hyped to hear it. Would you like to go first, Lisa, on this one? I have a feeling for the first 11, we're gonna have a lot of overlap.
I do as well. Maybe let's go line for
line by
line.
line.
Yeah, let's go line for
All
line.
right.
That way we can see. Because honestly, Goalkeeper was difficult for me. And
Oh yeah.
I made this after the playoffs started, right? But
Yeah.
I know that it takes into account only the regular season and not the playoffs. And when you look at Goalkeeper of the Year between AD Franch and Kaylin Sheridan, that was my big toss up. And I think when you look at just their regular seasons, I give the edge to Sheridan. I think that Sheridan just played a little bit more consistent this year, perhaps with a team that faced more shots, right, than Kansas City. It was under a bit more pressure and scrutiny because San Diego Wave was an expansion side. But as soon as you enter the playoffs, the edge goes to AD Franch because Sheridan ends up making the mistake early in the match for San Diego against Chicago. And you look at the match that Franch just had for Kansas City against OL Reign and like lights out, goalkeeper of the year, like best 11. Like there are just so many more accolades that go to her. So that was like my biggest toss up between Franch and Sheridan, like regular season Sheridan, postseason Franch.
You know what? I still think it's a really good pick. Honestly, I really, really do. You see the three nominees, three finalists, right, in that category. And I'm sure folks can, make their arguments to widen that from 3 nominees to 5 finalists, right? There are some category, like MVP category has 5 finalists, and we have these other categories that just sort of limit it to 3. And I think this is one of those areas where you could perhaps broaden that as well. But I think looking at regular season record, I like your pick, Sheridan. I went with Fallon Tullis-Joyce for my best 11 when looking at the overall regular season. I just really liked how this player just sort of really came in out of nowhere for a lot of folks watching NWSL perhaps for the first time, and really sort of just grabbing that position and cementing her place within it. And I'm talking all the way even through like Challenge Cup through regular season as well. I think we are just seeing just sort of witnessing the beginnings of Fallon Tullis-Joyce, quite frankly. Very, very young. I think the ceiling is very high. Goalkeepers tend to have a little bit of a longer, career in terms of their position on the pitch. And I'm hopeful that we'll get to see even more out of Tullis-Joyce in the years to come. So I went with Fallon Tullis-Joyce for goalkeeper. Let's take a look at this back line. This was my vote went as followed. I went with Sofia Huerta. I went with Naomi Girma. I went with Kelly Hubley, and I went with Carson Pickett for my back 4. How close are we, Lisa?
We are 4 for
Identical?
4.
I love it.
4 for 4. Yeah, I mean, you look at someone like a Naomi Girma. I mean, that was the first name I wrote down. That was like the easiest one for me. San Diego Wave center back, the rookie out of Stanford. This was a fantastic year for her. I mean, besides the accolades, she was nominated for MVP, Defender of the Year, and Rookie of the Year. I think her growth was just truly phenomenal and really fun to watch. She ends up being a captain at the end of the year for Casey Stoney in just her first year playing. She gets minutes with the national team, which only helped her on the pitch in the NWSL. Sofia Huerta for OL Reign, yes, right there alongside of you, a player that 2 years ago was not playing this position, a year and a half ago was not playing this position, and truly grew into it and really started to own it. Kelly Hubley at Portland Thorns, a lockdown defender, Iron Woman, I believe, for the Thorns as well, playing every single minute. I mean, so deserving of this position. And Carson Pickett, we talked about this last year, Sandra, if you remember, and we talk about it a lot. Like when defenders win awards, like, are you looking for like that 1v1 defender that is just like so defensively sound, someone like a Girma who is not going to let anything get past her. She's not going to get assists. She's not going to get goals on the year unless it's on like a corner kick and she's pulled up into the box. She's going to play a really simple pass, but you know that every single pass is on the money. So like Hubley and Girma are that for me. And Pickett and Huerta are my outside backs that do what like you want an outside back to do in a 4-back, which is expose other teams in the flanks, create opportunities, send crosses in. So that's kind of how I picked it. 2 for 2 center back, 2 outside backs.
No, that's where I'm at as well with it. When it comes to the individual award of Defender of the Year, I mean, it's in the title, right? Defender of the year. I want to see, the player that has the strong 1v1 abilities. I want to see the dual winning type of center backs, right? Recoveries are incredibly important, right? But I think that's maybe one of the neutral statistical areas for a defender. You have the outside backs in this modern era of football who cover a lot of ground, right? So I would imagine that they have a ton of recoveries under that. But I think we have seen oftentimes in more recent years, I would say that something like the fullback kind of gets those accolades, and then one of those stats that kind of comes up is the fact that they've delivered X amount of crosses or provided X amount of assists, and those aren't defensive statistics. And in my opinion,
they're great stats. They're great stats.
And it's like this concept. I've heard someone make this argument. Well, it's like it's like defense by playing offense, and I'm kind of like, that's an interesting spin on it. But
so are we gonna give someone like Trinity Rodman, who like it puts pressure on?
Yes, thank you. That's
she's
a great
gonna be
example.
a defender of the year because she starts the defense for Washington, and she puts
because she covers so much ground.
First wave of pressure between the 18s off the ball coverage. No.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I can't be sold on that. That. But I'm hopeful for we have a lot of great candidates in defender of the year, and of course, yes, two of them are outside backs. But I'm not too surprised that our back four look the same. I thought you've said a ton of great things that I agree with about Guillermo. I thought Kelly Hubley was one of these center backs really holding it down for Portland throughout the season. I mean, they're Iron Woman, quite frankly, playing every minute, and that's also something that I look for. Who is dominating within those positions as well for their team throughout the season. So yeah, I like this back four. I think when it comes to an ideal best 11 of the season, this is probably the top picks that you can get throughout it. Let's take a look at the middle third here. I think maybe we might have a little bit of some different shades here because I like my midfielders to absolutely be a bit of passing minded, a bit of just sort of tempo setting type of middies with a little bit of a punch to go through. So I absolutely went with Danny Colaprico and Vanessa DiBernardo to sort of hold things down in this middle third. I thought these were two players who we saw for the Chicago Red Stars sort of lead this team, ensure that this team made their way back to the postseason, stayed, pretty much stayed relevant throughout that upper half of the table throughout the duration of the regular season. We're talking just mere minutes from being, Iron Woman level for this team. It's like they hardly ever got a rest and somehow managed to, navigate this season throughout it. It's a very, very lengthy season, and sometimes it can take a toll on a body, especially a midfielder. But I also have Debinha in my best 11 as well, in this one as well. And I liked all three of them to sort of handle things in the midfield there. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, midfield is the hardest position for me to pick. And then like, I'm always very much like looking at my formation. So like, how many midfielders can I get in there? Can I do a 3-5?
Yeah. I would have loved it if you would have came on here and said like, I got a 3-5-2, and I would have been like, let's hear it. Yeah.
I did not though, right? I already lined up with 4 defenders, so I'm sticking with 3 in the midfield because it's so hard, right? Like you want to give the forwards their shout that they deserve.
Yeah,
and 3 for me, but midfielder is the hardest because I was limited to just 3 players that I had to pick from. I also went with Debinha. Huge year for her. She turned things around for this North Carolina team. Like, remember, they went on to win the Challenge Cup to start this year so many moons ago. And then the tear that Debinha went on to not only get goals, but to bring Caroline right along with her and Diana Ordonez. I think like the overall play that Debinha had this year was just top notch and phenomenal. I went with Lola Bonta of Kansas City Current. This player had a tremendous year, a knockout year with a team that turned everything around from last year. And Labonta was a player that was on this Kansas City team last year and struggled, right? They really struggled to pick up points. They struggled to find their rhythm. And I think it's a player like Labonta that does turn so much of that around off the pitch. And then it translates to the pitch because of how dedicated and just how talented day in and day out. Then I went with Sam Coffey, Portland Thorns. I wanted to give this player a shout because Coffey, as the defensive 6 midfielder, I think she was one of the best this year in the league. Like when you look at the consistency, the amount of minutes, the competition, the players around her, and one of the best, like the best six for me, the best defensive midfielder ever playing is one that rarely anything gets past them, and they're on the ball incredibly limited amounts of time. 1-2 touches, gets it in, gets it out, keeps it moving. They don't have the ball at their feet a lot of the time. They're not the sole like best player on the team, right? They just release the ball and give it to the best players on the team. And I think that Coffee did that tremendously. So that's now I've got 2 rookies on my best 11 in this first year. Labanza, Davinia, Coffee.
That's okay. That's the type of season that we were witnessing. I love that. I think that that's again great midfield. I can't wait for these official best 11s to drop. I feel like there will be a lot of overlap here, and the margins are so thin. I think between that first and that second, it's going to be exciting to see. All right, so it sounds like we're settling out for 4-3-3s, just to sort of paint the whole picture. Let's talk about our front three. Who do you got in your attack, Lisa?
I feel like these might be pretty similar. I've got Alex Morgan, Golden Boot winner, Sophia Smith for Portland Thorns, and then Mallory Pugh for Chicago Red Stars. Who you got, Sandra?
Same. Yeah.
So our back line and our front line, the exact same. Goalkeeper and midfielder, we switched it up a little.
Yeah, I love that. I just am like, I was like, there might be some overlap, but I feel like once we get in the middle, there might be a difference in there. But I'm not too surprised that the back four and the front three are the same. Listen, I don't know how you look at this trio and the individual seasons that they had for their respective clubs and not put them in your front three. Just outstanding individual seasons. You're talking about players that if you kind of pluck them out of the system of those teams, maybe you have some question marks around, certain games, again, because we're talking about those margins being so thin and so narrow. Well, there's also room for second 11s as well. And I would imagine that this is where things might get really, really different for the two of us. But, we'll just start from the back and go all the way to the front. I've got French on my second. I've got Lauren Barnes, Katie Naughton, Elizabeth Ball, and Tatum Milazzo for back four. How about you, Lisa?
I have French as well because I gave Sheridan the nod for my first team. So I have French in the back, and then I have Haley Mace, Alex Luera, and Milazzo and Ball. Sorry. I will say those again. I have Haley Mace from Kansas City Current, Alex Luera, Kansas City Current, Tatum Milazzo, Chicago, and then Elizabeth Ball.
So that's a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit of similarity. I like that. Yeah, no. We're watching obviously the postseasons are fresh in our mind, but I don't, Elizabeth Ball having again outstanding regular season. Love the performance that she's been putting in front of net for Kansas City Current. Milazzo, again, one of those players where you could sort of look at and say has had a really strong season. I think it was a toss-up, for somebody like a Milazzo or Morse for me. Morse also having a case as well. But I really liked seeing Owl Rain, and I think part of Valentilla's joy is having a pretty good season. The fact that she had some veteran presence in front of her, and somebody like Lauren Barnes, very reliable, solid player, someone who is able to shift either at that fullback or center back position for Laura Harvey and the Owl Rain. So that's how things shook out there. How about your middle third? Who you got for your middle three?
So I am. I'm sorry, I have like chicken scratch on my paper right here. So my second best is different. So it's Mace, Luera, and Milazzo. I don't have Ball in this one. I initially did crossed her out. So I went with 3 in the back.
Okay.
And then I'm going to go 4 in the midfield with Rose Lavelle, Taylor Korniak, Vanessa DiBernardo, and June Endo.
Love it. I love it so much. June Endo was outstanding this season. One of the really good off-season pickups, quite frankly, and doing it all.
I'm just so impressed with this player.
Yeah, doing it all for an expansion team. It's tough for me to place Endo because I think with how she was utilized in the second half of the season as well, like we saw her all over the pitch. At some point, we saw her very, very low, playing kind of like like a wingback kind of a role. So it's tough to see that.
I agree. Like putting Endo, like her positioning in my lineup. So that's why I just put her in the midfield. And with like Lavelle, Cornillac, DiBernardo, I mean, you gave DiBernardo a shout in your best 11, like one of the most consistent players in this league. But not as much of an impact player as I would have liked her to be. Like, right, maybe getting a couple more goals, a couple more assists this year, like on the stat sheet. That's why she's in my second. And then Cornillac, a player that just developed this year so tremendously. And then Rosie Lavelle.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine that there's like players that I don't even have on that like best 11, because there's absolutely that. Junendo's one of those for me that I went back and forth. I also went with 4 in the middle. I'm going more 4-4-2 versus 4-3-3. Labonte Coffee, Lavelle, and Sugita is going to be in my 4 as well. I thought had stepped in so big for Portland Thorns this year. I think one of the huge question marks for this team going into their regular season was, oh my God, Lindsay Horan's leaving. She's redoing her whole contract so that she can eventually come back to Portland, but she's definitely leaving for an extended period of time. What's going to happen in this middle third? What's it going to look like? And the answer was Hina Sugita.
Yeah.
Outstanding. I thought had a great performance. Again, one of those off-season pickups that could be, titled one of the best, quite frankly, in this league. I'm with you for all the things that you've mentioned with Labonte, Coffee, and Lavelle as well. My front 2, I'm going with the Mexican internationals. I'm going with Maria Sanchez and Diana Ordonez. Who do you got?
I have Ebony Salmon. I think her impact at Houston was tremendous. Kristen Hamilton at Kansas City, and then Diana Ordonez.
I love it. I can't wait to see how these 11s shake out for the NWSL. Let us know what you think. Who do you think should, be in either the first or second best 11s in NWSL? Did you vote? Did you vote during the fan voting period? I mean, that's really how you got to make your opinion heard, right? If you had the chance to vote. But keep an eye out for all of those types of awards, likely dropping throughout the duration of this week, leading up to the NWSL Championship final.